Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Lisa Jansen. I'm also known as Job Coach Germany. I wish you all a wonderful Tuesday to all of you beautiful miracles all around the globe. So today I would like to dive into part 3 of the book recommendation of this book, Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux. But before we start with that, I want to share some LinkedIn courses with you because obviously on Tuesdays I normally get the LinkedIn newsletter that shares free courses with me. And this week we have the following. So the first one is finding a remote job. And the way how you can do that is basically you type in LinkedIn and the course finding a remote job, or you simply go on LinkedIn and then search for the course there. And this finding a remote job is obviously very popular nowadays because a lot of people have started working remotely from their, they are working from home basically because of the pandemic. Basically, it started that they were able to take their laptops home and work from there, and now a lot of people have found out that it's actually very good for their mental health, or just simply for efficiency reasons, to work from home. Others obviously decide to go for hybrid systems where they work partly remote and partly in the office, or just simply others want to go back fully to their work life, to their office. But for everybody that is interested in finding a remote job, that's what this course is for. Then another course is called Managing Your Career as an Introvert. So you've probably heard or come across this differentiation between introverts and extroverts. And for those of you who have come across this topic and know that they are introverts, it's a good idea to take a look at that if you are currently looking for a new job, because there is no point in you being an introvert going for a company that puts you in a role where you have to go out there all the time. So for me personally, as I understand this concept, is that there are certain people out there that gain lots of energy from being around other people and just simply interacting with others. Those people are, in my eyes, extroverts. And then there are people that gain their energy or refill their tanks through being on their own and just simply taking some time to relax, or just taking a bath or reading a book or something like that. And I actually consider myself being an introvert myself, but nobody would ever expect that. Everybody just says, Lisa, you're always out there, you're on stage, you can give presentations, and you don't worry about being on a live stream like I do here today. But actually, the way how I regain my energy is through spending time on my own. And that's why I always enjoy very much going on holiday alone. And because that's basically how I fill up my energy tanks. And that's not an issue. It's not bad if you strengthen your energy through interacting with other people. And it's not a bad thing if you gain your energy from spending time on your own and not talking to other people. It's just very important for you to find out which one of these you are. Yeah. And maybe you can let me know whether you think differently of that concept. But as I said, Managing Your Career as an Introvert is another course on LinkedIn. So I would highly recommend that for everybody that is an introvert to take a look at that, because maybe it will help you rearrange the way how you are working. A third course that LinkedIn is offering is called Managing Your Job Seeker Mindset. And that is actually very important for all of you who are currently actively searching for a job, because it can be very frustrating and straining going online, not knowing what to search for, or you are searching but you cannot find anything, or you search and there are just simply too many options and you don't know how to or what to decide. So here the mindset is really key, and obviously to keep on going until you find the job of your dreams. And it doesn't stop. Like, this entire job application journey doesn't stop just when you sit in a new office, in a new role. The first 6 months of your job are very crucial for you to find out whether it's actually what you were looking for, and whether the company lives up to the standards that they have promised you during the job interview. And throughout this entire period, you can still apply for other jobs and quit within the probationary period, and leave the company again if you don't feel comfortable. But obviously, what normally happens, what I see a lot with my coachees as well, is once they have the job, they just simply, the application process is out the window. They don't think about that anymore, because they're just relieved that they don't have to do the job search anymore. And for that, it is very important to strengthen your mindset. So managing your job seeker mindset is a course that is available through LinkedIn this week. And another one, the last one, is just simply job seeker tips. And that's basically relevant for everybody that is currently searching for a new job, or is thinking about, maybe I can go into job searching in a couple of months or maybe next year. So for some of you who are really into strategy, that might be very helpful to already get an idea of, okay, what are the things that I actually need to pay attention to with regards to job seeking. So Job Seeker Tips is the 4th course on LinkedIn. All right, so those were the 4 courses that I wanted to share with you that LinkedIn shared with me this week. And let's dive into part 3 of Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux. So the first concept was basically a little recap that we have these stages, right? So different management style stages, from red to amber to orange to green, and the evolutionary worldview is teal, and that's what we're talking about. So in part 2, I was talking about the teal, or the new style of management, and how management is set up, or simply how we lead organizations. That was explained in part 2. If you haven't had the chance to take a look at that yet, then feel free to go onto my YouTube channel, Lisa Jans. Mine is Job Coach Germany, and simply search for those, because then you get a better idea of the overall concept. But as I said, with each of these different stages, there were breakthroughs and obviously shadow sides. And with simply can go back. So with the breakthroughs with red were, for example, the division of labor, and they had top-down authorities. Then the traditional ones were the amber. Was the amber stage. There they had the breakthroughs of replicable processes and stable organization charts. And obviously they always developed out of that into a new stage. The orange stage was also classed as achievement, and they had 3 breakthroughs called innovation, accountability, and meritocracy. And then there was the green stage that was also, or can be seen as a pluralist worldview, and they were all about empowerment, values-driven culture, and stakeholder value. And now in this teal evolutionary stage, we have 3 other breakthroughs, which is called self-management, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose. And because this evolutionary worldview, this teal view, how it is described in this book by Laloux, is that we don't know a lot about that yet. We are still in that phase of actually defining and shaping this stage. So we are in the middle of that. This book was written in 2016, so we have been in this stage for several years now. And there are certain examples that are being shared in the book, how companies are actually implementing those new management styles. And this one focus that we're looking at today is the self-management part of this new style of management. So there was a company that was shared. So there was a company example that was shared in the book that was called Birdsong. So several nurses that are working together in order to change the healthcare system in the Netherlands. And it has now more than 9,000 people that are working for this company. And no one is the boss of anyone else. So that is something with regards to self-management in this new style of management. And it's not only Birdsong. Other large and very successful organizations operate entirely without the familiar pyramid, without managers. But no layers of management, so even the author himself thought that was impossible. This is because we all have grown up, like, yeah, most of us, believing that it's possible perhaps for a team of 4 or 5 people to operate without a boss. But any group that is larger than that needs a structure, needs a boss, needs someone to call the shots. So you can let me know in the comments what you think about that concept. The truth is that large groups need structure and coordinating mechanisms, but can operate more powerfully without bosses. Our world is becoming too complex for us to continue operating with the pyramid system. When complexity increases, the pyramid breaks down. The few people at the top, however smart they are, don't have enough bandwidth to grasp and deal with all the complexity that there is. So, hierarchy cannot cope with complexity. It's almost become a rule today. CEOs and top leaders are hopelessly overworked, right? We all know that. And it's not just CEOs and leaders or managers, but nearly everybody is overworked. Any decision that requires some coordination, some broad perspective, has to pass by them, by the CEO and the manager. Because in paramedical organizations, it's only at the top that reporting lines converge. They often feel uneasy, nervous about making decisions with only a few facts and arguments presented to them. So you can also take a look at the other perspective. So it's not just us as the normal worker that is frustrated with the decisions that are being made at the top, but also the person that needs to make the decision is frustrated because they know that they don't get all of the information that is probably needed in order to make a legitimate decision. Yeah. So time at the top is so precious that people below often spend weeks preparing for a 30-minute slot they are given with the executive committee. Many important decisions actually never get a slot, never get made. Other decisions made at the top turn out to be poor or even disastrous because of politics and because people at the top simply don't have time to really understand what's going on in the field. And that is something that I always find very, very disturbing and crucial that it needs to be discussed. I've seen that many times in various companies where I've worked, that the assistants or the managers that were talking to the CEO were thinking about, okay, are these topics that I can escalate to the top and share with the boss or not? And I was always thinking, well, there are actually fires burning here within the field. How can you not pass this on to the CEO? That was quite weird. Because I always think that it's not good if the leaders don't know what is going on in the field, because then obviously it can quickly turn upside down, and then obviously the retention rates are rising and everything that we don't need in companies, right? Even if people at the top throw in more hours, it's a structural problem that more hours won't solve. So what's the alternative? And this is something that I still see, especially on LinkedIn. I see people that are sharing those like 80-hour weeks, and I know that especially in America it is very common that people work more than 60 hours a week, and they're proud of it and they share that on LinkedIn. I got up at 4 a.m. to be of service to you guys. And obviously that would be very nice if you're doing that because you have intrinsic motivation, but if you're doing that in order to push the numbers, it's not a good motivation, and you will something in your life will suffer from that decision of putting in that many hours and not focusing on your mental health, on your physical health, or for example spending time with your family and friends to get this sort of work-life balance or work-life integration, however you want to call it. So I actually think that we should get we should take a step back and reevaluate of what a healthy work environment and a healthy relationship to our work life and the time that we spend at our workplace actually looks like. And that is very individual in my eyes. Yeah. So if I work 60 hours, then maybe that's my question, my decision. But I need to have the right reasons for myself, not for you, not for my family, but for me as an individual. And in Germany, we have for let's say normal workers with normal contracts, we normally talk about 40 hours a week that we work. Yeah. But for some people, that's not the right amount. For some people, it may just be 20. For others, it might be 45 or 50. And that is something that you need to define for yourself. And that is something that I always do and ask my coachees, what is an amount of time that you would like to spend at your workplace? And then you can negotiate, because you cannot just simply negotiate your salary. You can also negotiate the hours that you want to work with that company. Okay. Okay, so so the question was, what's the alternative of this hierarchy style, right? And in this book, they compare it to the nature. So birds in a flock don't knock each other out, right? And they don't have a leader. Or take an ecosystem such as a forest and imagine running it with layers of hierarchy. It wouldn't work. Yeah. And the good news is we now know how to operate large organizations without power hierarchies. So they have found ways to import the principles that fuel truly complex systems in nature into the workplace. So they have used these examples from nature and implemented it in organizations. As soon as we talk about self-management, all sorts of misunderstandings arise, and we often try to make sense of something new by projecting old thoughts onto it. And that is something that's a mistake that we do all the time in every aspect of our lives. So misperception number one, many people assume that self-management means that there is no structure, that everything is informal and chaotic. The mistaken assumption here is that no bosses means anybody can do what they want, but that's actually not the case. In self-management, just like in nature, there are structures and coordination mechanisms. People work in defined roles, and there are processes for how to make decisions, how to deal with conflict, and so on. The misperception number two is the common assumption here is self-management means consensus decision-making and endless meetings. But you can be reassured that's not the case. Self-managing organizations work with decision-making mechanisms that are both simpler and more powerful than consensus. Actually, in self-managing organizations, there tend to be fewer meetings compared to nowadays. And misperception number three is that self-management is still somehow experimental and unproven. And that is simply not true, because there are a lot of companies that have proven differently. Morningstar is a tomato processing company, and they have gone through economic booms and busts and have been shown to be remarkably resilient, like ecosystems. So they are more resilient than companies nowadays. Self-management requires that we upgrade almost all of the basic practices of management. For self-management to work, it's not enough to take hierarchy out. We need to grow a system of distributed authority, which requires that we upgrade almost all existing management practices and structures. Yeah, so that also supports the idea of that we don't have to start a company from scratch to implement this new style of working, but we can actually change the management style if we adjust the entire structure in all different fields. Yeah. And here is one example. I'm going to read this entire story to you. Here's another example. An automotive supplier structured almost exactly like Birdsong. Self-management has proven itself in many industries. There are, for instance, a number of very successful factories that operate in this way. One of them is Favi. a 500-person brass foundry in the north of France that produces gearbox forks for the automotive industry, among others. It was founded in the 1950s and was run for decades in traditional ways. There was a CEO, an executive committee, and in the factory, a chef de production commanding the chef de service who commanded the chef d'atelier, who commanded the chef d'équipe, who commanded the workers. So a French company. I was trying a little bit to use my French here. Then in 1983, a new CEO was appointed, Jean-François Zobry, a maverick and charismatic former paratrooper who turned Favi upside down. Today, Favi operates on lines very similar to Birdsong. There are 13 self-managing mini factories. Just imagine that. Yeah, so it's a supplier for automotive in the automotive industry, and they are not working as one big thing that is optimizing everything all the time, but in 13 mini factories. Most mini factories serve a specific client. There is the Volvo team, the Volkswagen team, the Audi team. And there are a few upstream production teams, the foundry team, the mold repair team, and support teams such as the engineering team, the sales support team, etc. Above the teams, there is no layer of management, no executive committee other than the CEO, more on the role of the CEO. The quotation marks are deliberate. And we will take a look at that in another episode. Favi's results are quite extraordinary. All its competitors have moved to China to enjoy cheaper labor costs. Yet, Favi is not only the one producer left standing in Europe, it commands a 50% market share for its product. Its quality is legendary and its on-time delivery close to mythical. Not a single order has shipped late in over 25 years. And here you see it's very resilient over 25 years. That's a long time. Favi's profit margins are so high that most years, despite Chinese competition, workers make 16 or 17 months of salary thanks to profit sharing. This is another concept we will dive into. There is virtually no employee turnover. Workers who have tasted Favi's way of working can't see themselves going back to traditionally run factories. So this is a great example. Let's take a look at the decision making. We've grown up believing there are basically 3 ways to make decisions. Unfortunately, none of them works particularly well in organizations. So we have the top-down hierarchical decision making, then we have the consensus, or we have the vote. So the majority rule, right? So the top-down hierarchical one would be I decide, or I can delegate if I feel like it. In any case, I have the last word. So one person calls the shots. Then in the pluralistic view, it took 16 hours, but I think we now all agree on the agenda of the meeting, right? So there you obviously spend a lot of time in order to find a consensus. And then in the majority rule, there's, for example, could be a worker that says, guys, please listen. This is my area of expertise. It's a terrible idea. And then all the others say, perhaps, but we are asked to vote, not to listen. So they just simply take their vote, but they may not be very informed about the decision or the vote that they are taking. So the advice process, the critical innovation underpinning self-management. So this is fascinating. Several organizations independently discovered a better decision-making mechanism. One company called it the advice process, a name that captures its essence well. The principle is that anyone can make any decision, including spending company money. But first, that person has to seek advice from one, people who have expertise about the topic, and 2, from those that will be meaningfully affected, that will have to live with the decision. The decision maker must consider all advice seriously. After careful consideration, the decision maker chooses what he sees as the best course of action, even if that means going against a piece of advice received from a colleague. In practice, the advice process proves remarkably powerful. Every decision is informed by a form of collective intelligence, as everyone who has something meaningful to contribute is heard. And here's why people take the advice process very seriously. They are on both ends of the equation all the time. Imagine that one is mourning, you give advice to a colleague. Of course, you hope that she will consider it very carefully. And so later that day, when the same colleague comes to you to give you advice on a different topic, it will be hard for you to simply dismiss her advice, right? Everyone is enmeshed in a deep network of advice giving. And that is something that is obviously very, very important. The bigger the decision, the more people need to be asked for advice. Okay, so that makes sense. Now let's take a look at the compensation and incentives. It doesn't need to be complicated like today, like nowadays. One of the first questions people often ask is, so when there are no more bosses, who gets to decide who makes how much money? Who gets a pay rise or a fed bonus? Talking about bonuses, here's an interesting finding. None of the organizations that were researched by Laloux in this book believes in individual or team incentives. For instance, at Favi, no one is incentivized, not even the salespeople. Actually, salespeople at Favi don't even have targets. Yeah. And here we realize that this is really strange. Salespeople without targets and the promise of a fed bonus? Seriously, how can that work? But come to think of it, a salesperson at Favi, for example, a salesperson from the Audi or the Volvo team meets his colleagues every week to tell them about the weekly order. He sees how how everyone cheers when the order is large and how there is disappointment when the order is small. His teammates' livelihood depends on a healthy order book. What more incentive does he need? If a person isn't motivated to do great work, something is up. And now listen carefully, because that's the part that I like the most about this new management style, or this new way of working in organizations. Let's talk about the issue and try to discover what blocks the person's inner motivation. But today, in many workplaces, we simply accept that most people aren't motivated, and we try to buy them off with the promise of a fed bonus, despite the fact that bonuses actually don't work. Instead of bonuses, many organizations that Laloux researched in this book simply share a part of the profit with everyone when profits are abundant. So profit sharing is the key here. So there is another example. So this company that I mentioned earlier is the Morningstar, the tomato producing company. At Morningstar, pay increases are self-initiated. Have you heard of that? It makes me smile because I think that's a really new concept and I like it. If you work there, once a year you write a letter in which you state what raise you think you deserve. You also discuss with colleagues in your area who wants to volunteer for this year's salary panel that will provide advice. So, for example, one employee could say, this year not much has changed and I don't expect more than a cost of living adjustment. Another person could say, I feel I deserve a 7% raise. Or a third person could say, I add backup material about the successful project I have delivered and 360 feedback from colleagues. Now, what I find very good in this example is this cost of living adjustment, because many of you don't talk to their employers on a regular basis. You don't go to your boss once a year to ask for a pay rise, simply to adjust for the cost of living, because obviously there's inflation, and especially nowadays the prices of products and simply food are increasing, and you need to have an adjustment for that as well, right? But nobody ever goes to their boss and asks for that. Yeah, so simply you are losing money year by year. And here, this is the baseline. Yeah. So this cost of living adjustment is the baseline. And if you think you deserve more, you can go for more and ask for more. And then the panel basically decides and gets together. So the panel's job is to read all the letters carefully and to provide feedback. Then, For example, they could go back to the guy that asked for 7% more and they say, your 7% seems on the high side. We suggest that 5% would be more in line with what we've seen with other colleagues. Whether this person then goes for this decision or not is up to them individually, but it is discussed with one another. And this is another great aspect of this company, that they, for example, say, we find you've been too humble. You've taken on more responsibility, and a 4% raise would be fully in order. So even if that person just simply asked for a cost of living adjustment, the panel could also say, no, you have done more. We want you to have a pay rise. Yeah, you should ask for more. People are remarkably good at estimating their value. In any given year at Morningstar, roughly 3/4 of colleagues will go simply with a cost of living increase and a quarter with a salary raise on top of it. Sometimes the salary panel tells colleagues they've been too humble. It really happens. And I like that. I really love that. And in a handful of cases, the panel tells people they might have aimed too high. In such cases, the panel has no authority to force the colleague to accept its advice. But if a colleague seems to be really unreasonable, the panel can invoke an extra step. Listen carefully. A conflict resolution mechanism that creates the space to find a solution agreeable to everyone. This is just incredible, isn't it? And now, last but not least, the performance management. What prevents people from simply slacking off? In traditional organizations, it's the leadership's role to put pressure on the system, to challenge subordinates to do more and to do things faster, right? When that pressure disappears, will people not simply start to slack off? Many self-managing organizations have found the opposite, as strange as it might sound. At Birdsong, for example, nurses need to help one another set healthy boundaries and not work too much. What is happening here? How come people without bosses don't become complacent? The short answer seems to be this: intrinsic motivation, calibrated by peer emulation and market demands. Most workplaces slowly but surely sap people's motivation. Young recruits often beam with energy and with ideas, but then again and again, their ideas get lost in the quicksand of the company's decision making. I have seen that many times. Have you? At the same time, they are regularly asked to comply with some absurd decision made up high the pyramid. At some point, they settle for less and say, simply tell me what you want and I'll do it. When people cannot express their talents, something in them dies a little. Yeah? Has something inside of you died? I find that really disturbing that we put up with that. But this can be reversed. Nurses who join Birdsong often share that they feel like they've somehow found new life. All of us are happier at the end of the day where we did great work rather than lousy work. When nothing stands in the way of our intrinsic motivation, we tend to be, well, motivated. Peer emulation plays a big role too. At Birdsong, teams see every month how they compare with others in terms of productive hours. This information is public. When a team lands at the bottom of the list, antibodies, or call it pride, kicks in. There will always be a team member who will call a team meeting to discuss the situation. The same is true when one team member isn't pulling her weight. At some point, another team member will raise the issue. You can hide from a boss. It's much harder to hide from colleagues. And then there is market demand. Remember how changes at Favi brought workers in much closer contact with their clients? Every week, workers know about the order their mini factory receives. Workers have full transparency and know that if they drop the ball, Chinese competitors would love to pick it up. Reality is a more powerful motivator than hierarchy. And last but not least on this topic, no power hierarchy means lots of natural hierarchies. But this doesn't mean that everyone is equal. And that is something that I really want to stress. So it's not about everybody being equal, but quite the opposite is true. In the absence of a power hierarchy, lots of natural, healthy hierarchies start to emerge. Some nurses with birdsong, for example, will naturally have a larger contribution to make or more say based on their expertise, their interest, or willingness to step in. One nurse might be a particularly good listener and coach to her colleagues. Another might be a great planner and organizer, whereas another might be a living encyclopedia of medical conditions. Yet another might have a knack for handling conflict within the team or within the feuding family of a patient. So, fluid hierarchies of recognition, influence, and skills emerge. This is not about making everyone equal. Some people will tend to focus on narrower rules. So, no power authority over another. That's the key. Okay. So, no power authority over somebody that is working less, for example. And so, no power hierarchy on hiring, firing, or salary. The goal is not to make everyone equally powerful, but to make everyone fully powerful. There is a difference, yeah? Not equally powerful, but fully powerful. This is best understood using a metaphor from nature again. A fern or a mushroom growing next to a tree might not reach as high as the tree, but that is not the point. Through a complex collaboration involving exchanges of nutrients, moisture, and shade, the mushroom, fern, and tree don't compete as much as they cooperate to grow into the biggest and healthiest versions of themselves. It's the same in teal organizations. The point is not to make everyone equal. It is to allow all employees to grow into the strongest, healthiest version of themselves. So, how does that sound to you? Growing into your strongest, healthiest version of yourself. And this is the picture that they chose to use for that. Yeah. I find that very, very inspiring. And so when we move on with that book, we will talk about striving for wholeness, which is breakthrough number 2, striving for wholeness. But this is something that I will probably pick up at the end of the week, because tomorrow we have a day off. Yeah, so it's a Father's Day, and I will probably talk about a different topic tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you tomorrow, and thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. Bye bye, everybody.